Peace, family. It's your brother, Marc Lamont Hill. Welcome to Night School. Every night here on the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel, we host Night School, where we break down the most entrenched debates, the most controversial subjects, the most urgent topics going on in the world today. And tonight is no different. I want to shout out everybody who joined us last night, by the way. Many of you today are here courtesy of yesterday. I'm talking about our live special coverage of the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. We got record numbers on the channel. We got record views and record memberships, record original memberships, not counting donations y'all give sometimes. And it was amazing. We had a spirited conversation. We had some intense debate. We had just an amazing evening of analysis. Hopefully, radical analysis, left-wing analysis, deep dive analysis, but even more fundamentally, just honest analysis of what's going on the political front. So I want to shout out everybody who is here and also everybody who joined the channel because of that. If you're here for the first time, welcome. Also drop your name in the chat well, drop in your location, drop in your city, your state, or your country. This is a global classroom, and so we want to make sure that we know where everybody's coming in from. But everybody in the chat, no matter where you're coming in from, and no matter how long you've been down with Night School, hit present in the chat. Well, type present so we know you're here. It also lets those YouTube algorithms know that you're rocking with us. I want to start tonight with a political story. It's almost impossible to not have a political story after everything that happened last night. And when I say a political story, I mean an American electoral politics story rooted in these debates. It was crazy last night. Anyway, let's get to it. Donald Trump and his running mate JD Vance, they have a habit of pushing things that are simply untrue. They will literally just raw dog a lie. They will stand out in the world, declare something to be true. If it's debunked, they don't care. If they made it up, that's fine. If they were sincerely believing it was true and then got new information, they ignore it. This is who and what the Trump administration, and now the Trump-Vance campaign, are prone to doing. Well, they're doing it again. Right now, they are continuing to advance a false claim about Haitian migrants. For a while now, days, if not weeks, they've been arguing that Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio, JD Vance's state, they're stealing ducks and they're stealing cats. And they're not just stealing them, they're also allegedly eating them. That's right. The man who hates childless cat ladies is now telling people to lock up their pets. Now, Trump said it, but this is a Vance whopper. Vance is the one who's been running around with this ridiculous story. And it's been debunked. It's a racist lie. It's an unfounded myth. But, why let the truth get in the way of a good story? Well, fortunately, we had a journalist who, for once in this crazy moment, had the professionalism and the temerity and the honesty and the integrity to actually challenge him on the lie, a lie that was debunked last night during the debate. Well, NBC's Yamiche Alcindor, a brilliant journalist, a wonderful journalist who we've seen on the front lines standing up for truth multiple times, especially against Donald Trump. She caught up with Vance. She challenged him on this, and Vance did what Vance does. He did what Trump would do. He just doubled down on the lie and turned the lie into a super lie. Check out what he said.
Competence of Kamala Harris.
Senator Vance, what do you say to Haitian Americans and Haitian immigrants who say spreading false claims about them put their lives at risk?
Well, I don't think that no one has spread false claims. What they've said is that a small migrant community, 20,000, so it's big for the city of Springfield, but it's small compared to all Haitians in the United States of America, that small migrant community has caused a lot of problems. It's led to higher rates of communicable diseases. That's a verifiable fact. It's led to animals disappearing. Many of my constituents have said that has been happening. It's led to higher home prices. That is a verifiable fact. So this influx has led to a lot of.
But you said that immigrants have eaten animals, and city officials have said that that's not true.
City officials have said that's not true. That's not actually accurate. What they've said.
The Springfield
is
city manager said there's no evidence that immigrants are eating animals, and you have been saying, and Donald Trump just said on stage that they are eating animals. I'm asking you. Yes, I'm asking you. I'm asking you.
Can you answer? Go ahead. Can you ask the question and then let me answer it?
Yes, please.
The city manager said there's no verifiable evidence. A lot of residents on the ground have said that there is. That just means the city manager, I think, isn't fully in touch with what's going on the ground there. I've heard from many of my own constituents who have seen these things with their own eyes, who've seen these abductions with their own eyes, who've seen geese being taken.
Let's think about this for a second. Donald Trump says something ridiculous based on what JD Vance said to him, which was ridiculous, right? That Haitian migrants are not just stealing people's ducks and cats, but eating them. And Vance is, I was trying to pull up the physical transcript. Sorry for the tech issue here, but we have a transcript here between JD Vance and Yamiche Alcindor. And when she challenges him on the facts, he says, well, I don't think that. He said, no one has spread false claims. What they've said is that a small migrant community, 20,000, so it's big for a city of Springfield, but small, blah, blah, blah. It's led to the small migrant community has caused a lot of problems. It's led to higher rates of communicable diseases. That's a verifiable fact. That's led to animals disappearing. Many of my constituents have said that has been happening. It's led to higher home prices. That's a verifiable fact. So she pushes back and says, but you say that immigrants have eaten animals. City officials say it's not true. She said that's not, he said that's not actually accurate. City officials have said that's not true, it's not accurate. And she again reiterates, Springfield city manager said there's no evidence that immigrants are eating animals. And you've been saying it, they just said it, right? So he tries to do the double reverse. He says, that just means the city manager isn't fully in touch with what's going on the ground. I've heard it from my own constituents who have seen these things with their own eyes, who have seen these abductions with their own eyes, who have seen these geese being taken out of local parks and slaughtered in front of their eyes. What do I think is a bigger problem? Insulting 20,000 people, blah, 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 blah. So he says, wait a minute, are you calling the people liars? Are you saying that my constituents are liars? I stand by my constituents when they say that they watched geese abductions, they watched slaughters with their own eyes. He didn't go so far as to say they watched the consumption of these animals with their own eyes, but all of it is so silly. I'll tell you why. One, there's a serious element to this, and that is that there's a long history of framing immigrants, particularly Black and brown immigrants, as diseased populations. They also did that to Jews. They also did that to Irish at one point. They've done it to Italians at one point. But there's a kind of uninterrupted tradition of framing Black and brown people as diseased, and Haitians in particular have long been accused of carrying diseases, long been accused of being uncivilized by Western standards. These are all white supremacist, imperialists, colonial, settler colonial, whatever you want to call them, lies that are used to justify the dehumanization of these people, but also their exploitation, their oppression, their manipulation, and ultimately their disposability. In other words, they tell you all these lies about these people so they can justify exploiting them, taking their stuff, and making you think they didn't deserve it in the first place. And so when you hear a story about Haitians sneaking in and stealing geese or cats or whatever and eating them, it's playing into that. It's playing into all these narratives about the exotic other who can't be trusted, about these indigenous religions and indigenous traditions and indigenous cultures of a place that aren't as good as ours. And when those people who have stuff that's not as good as ours come over here, they try to smuggle in all their not as good as ours traditions and practices and rituals, and we can't have it. So these white people are saying that. And instead of just acknowledging that it's a myth or that he got bad information, JD Vance doubles down. So I've been told this by people who saw it with their own eyes. So, and he's saying that the city officials aren't on the ground. So the Trump administration is a law and order administration. The Trump administration is an administration that prides itself on listening to cops, trusting cops. You know, blue lives matter. We stand with the police no matter what. We want to end. You know, we want to make sure that there's that they get federal. We want to give them federal qualified immunity. We want to make sure that you can't hold a cop accountable for anything because they got a tough job and they're almost always right. But now all of a sudden, all these 20,000 white people, or all these tens or hundreds of thousands of white people who are now being infiltrated by 20,000 Haitians are watching live animal abductions and slaughters and people eating whole chickens' feathers coming out of their mouth, all this wild ridiculousness. They're watching it. Are we to believe that these white people don't call the police? I don't know any community of white people. Shit, I don't know any community of any people that watch mass animal abductions and don't call the police, and don't nobody love their pets more than white Americans. White people love them some pets. If a white person saw a cat missing or a dog missing, I guarantee you they call in the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines, the Coast Guard, the FBI, the GBI, the CIA, everybody, Scotland Yard, they don't care. They call in everybody. So we're to believe that somehow all these black and brown people are harming all the property of these white people, and the police aren't being contacted, or the police are contacting them and simply can't find evidence? Because the city officials said there's no evidence. The city official, they're not calling the city accountant. They're talking about the mayor. They're talking about the police chief. They're talking about people who have connections to the ground. So you're effectively asking us to believe now that these random white people, these random white citizens, are telling the truth. And are the police covering it up? Are the police, is it that difficult to find evidence that someone stole your cat and ate it? I mean, this is how stupid this sounds. And JD Vance knows it's not true. He knows it's not true. That's the sad part. JD Vance is too smart to be that dumb. But what JD Vance also knows is that there's a population of people who have an investment in believing the narrative. There is a population of American citizens who want to believe the worst about migrants so that they can justify their xenophobia and their draconian public policy desires. They want to be able to build walls and ban Muslims and block Haitians and do all these things. And so they come up with the most ridiculous stories. They lie about them. They post them. They distribute them on social media. And then Joe Schmo, who believes in urban legends. There's a wonderful book called Heard It Through the Grapevine that talks about how urban legends spread. It's a classic book. You should read it. People then believe it, or they think they saw it, or they believe their next door neighbor saw it. And if my next door neighbor saw it, then I might as well have seen it. And so suddenly it becomes whispered down the lane. And so now everybody says, oh, everybody knows this happens, when in fact there's no evidence of it happening. But again, JD Vance doesn't have to get into the folklore theory of it. He just knows that if a bunch of people think this is happening and he can create a panic around it, then they will believe that the only people who can save them, right, are Trump Vance. The same people who are willing to believe that Haitians are eating cats are also desperate to believe that Trump and Vance can protect them from those animal eating, pet stealing Haitian migrants. That is why it's so important to debunk in real time. It's so important that the debate last night featured live fact checking, but it's also so important that reporters, that journalists confront these people at every opportunity. We have to challenge them at every turn so that when JD Vance responds the way he just did, he looks and sounds as stupid as he just did, because then the voter can say, okay, wait, at least a reasonable voter can say, wait a minute. And in a state like Ohio, you need just a slice of reasonable voters to make a different choice. Anyway, we'll move on, because this is the dumbest thing that I have ever heard and seen. And I see some of y'all in the comments defending this. Defend yourselves, explain yourselves. I'm not even going to engage y'all today. I instead am going to let the comment section, I'm gonna let the class handle the light work. All right, y'all, we gotta move on to another story that I think is important. A story that I know is important. And a comment that came up about that. I'll tell you exactly what I'm talking about. By the way, we got some comments coming in. Jazz said, Mark, Donald Trump and his cronies picked the right person for Trump VP. They knew that JD would lie and do anything for Donald Trump. That is absolutely true. Little Miss 222 said, exactly. I'm old enough to remember when a Chinese food restaurant popped up in town. People would talk ish. Very true. Again, playing on lies, stereotypes, ugly untruths about communities of people. And then suddenly people would say, oh, that restaurant popped up. Oh, yeah, you heard about that missing cat. Oh, yeah, my cat went missing. Or my best friend's cat went missing. Usually the way lies work is that no one says it happened to them. They say it happened to someone they know. So it's just close enough that it's trustworthy and doesn't feel like it's hearsay, but no one has to be accountable for the lie. And so then suddenly it becomes whispered down the lane and everybody trusts everybody. And Chinese people, Chinese Americans are ultimately harmed by this. Migrants from Haiti are harmed by this. We could go on and on to all the different people. An interesting comment came in from Boaz Kim Music that I want to address. Boaz Kim Music said, let's be honest now. Harris didn't get fact checked nearly as much. That's in response to me saying, shout out to the reporters who fact checked Donald Trump in real time. Was Kamala Harris sufficiently fact-checked at last night's debate? That is an important question. It is, in some ways, the most under-examined question. Let me type. You know, I'm gonna make a banner for it so we can have a whole segment on it. Thank you, everybody. You know how, like, in class, somebody asks a question, y'all get more homework, or y'all think y'all about to get out of class, you got an extra thing you got to do. Well, y'all could thank Boaz Kim Music for giving y'all more homework. Of course, y'all nerds, so y'all probably looking forward to this. Here y'all go. Was Kamala Harris fact-checked enough at last night's debate? There are many people who watched the Donald Trump-Kamala Harris debate and felt excited, energized, encouraged by the fact that, unlike the CNN debate, where the host seemed to be asleep at the wheel as Donald Trump said any and everything, regardless of what the truth or the facts demonstrated, tonight, the ABC, or last night, the ABC host, especially David Weir, pushed back against Donald Trump, noting that, you know, abortions don't really happen in the 9th month after a baby is born, noting that no one has demonstrated any evidence that Haitian migrants are stealing and eating people's animals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there was a kind of collective applause given to those journalists for challenging and checking Donald Trump's facts, or really lies. But there was also a narrative that came up from the right, and really from Donald Trump originally, that the fact checking was only one-sided and only one directional. They argued that Donald Trump was really facing 3-on-1 opposition. He was facing the two hosts and Kamala Harris. He was saying that it was unfair. Other people, other conservatives said, hey, Donald Trump was being challenged by the hosts and Kamala Harris was not. Therefore, it was an unfair debate. Now, a couple of things here. One, when people tend to complain about that kind of stuff, the odds were stacked against me, the hosts were cheating, the journalists were asking the wrong questions to me and not to thee, all that kind of stuff is usually a sign that you're lost. To me, that was the biggest sign that Donald Trump lost. One, we got eyes and ears and saw and heard what happened. Two, Donald Trump's staunchest defenders largely said that it was close or it was a tie, like the Trump surrogate who came on my show last night, who said this was a tie. Like I said, when you in a fight growing up, if you win, you say you won. If you lost, you say it was a tie. if you lost real bad, you say something like, oh, somebody jumped me, right? You have to have an excuse. But generally, if you say it's a tie, it's because you lost. Donald Trump lost. So that's why a lot of this complaining is emerging. That said, there is a very clear, demonstrable record and transcript where you can see that Donald Trump was fact-checked more than Kamala Harris. Why was Kamala Harris fact-checked less than Donald Trump? That's the question you got to ask, because keep in mind, the fact that one person was fact-checked a lot and the other person was fact-checked little doesn't necessarily mean that something untoward was happening. It doesn't mean that something unfair went down. It could just mean that one person was lying a whole lot more, right? Like one person was lying a whole lot more. So if you tell 10 lies and I tell 2 lies, then yeah, you're gonna get fact-checked more. Or if you tell 5, if you say 5 things that are outright lies and 5 things that are sketchy or untrue or just, debatable, you're going to still have more fact checks emerge than somebody who says 2 things that are like that. So I'm saying that to say, every time you get fact checked, it's not because you're lying. Sometimes you just misspeak, or sometimes you make an error, or sometimes there's a debatable piece of data that the journalist in the room or the fact checker in the room wants the world to know is at least debatable and not a taken for granted certainty. All of that is part of what happened last night. Kamala Harris absolutely told fewer lies than Donald Trump. There is no doubt about that in my mind. That's why she was fact-checked less. But that doesn't mean that she was fact-checked enough. Someone said here she didn't lie at all. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. At the very least, Kamala Harris said a couple of things that at least warranted a pushback, if not an outright fact check. She also said things that warranted a challenge or a follow-up question. And if Donald Trump were a better debater or a smart, engaged interlocutor, or if he weren't so caught up in his ego because he was defending his crowd size and how much the imperialist leaders around the world love him, then maybe he could have had a different conversation as well. But here's where I'm going. Let me be specific so I don't sound all nebulous and abstract. Kamala Harris said that she stands with Israel. That's not a lie. She does. She says she believes that Israel has a right to defend itself. That's not a lie. But Kamala Harris also said very clearly the same thing she said a couple of weeks ago at a rally, the same thing she has said in interviews, which I find problematic. That has happened repeatedly. And that is, she has continued to say that on October 7th, Hamas committed mass rapes. Mass rapes. This is an important thing. When the October 7th tragedy happens, and I am unequivocal and unambiguous in saying it was a tragedy. Anytime 1,200 people die, it's a tragedy. Anytime anybody dies, it's a tragedy. Anybody innocent dies, it's a tragedy. And we can have philosophical debates about what constitutes innocence, but 1,200 people dying, even when you place it in context, still, to me, at some level, a human tragedy. At every level, it's a human tragedy. But that wasn't enough. Kamala Harris had to also say that Hamas didn't just commit acts of violence, which some people would see as acts of resistance, and some people would say was a response to October 6th and October 5th and every other day of effective occupation, that it was a response to a siege and an occupation and apartheid and all these things. People would say that there are people who could make an argument that 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 even the concert itself, which is taking place in land that's been stolen, and the fact that you're talking about an illegal settlement there makes you a combatant. I mean, there are philosophical and political and theoretical debates that people could have about all of that, but those type of debates make it harder to engage in a genocidal invasion of the Gaza Strip. So what happens on September 7th is October 7th is you saw the mass distribution of disinformation and misinformation. You started to hear that Hamas didn't just invade, and it wasn't just a multi-pronged aerial assault and ground assault and blah, 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 but that it was also mass beheadings of babies and mass rapes. These types of narratives were done to garner, to produce global outrage, global anger, global sympathy, and global justification for Israel's military response, which would be disproportionate and indiscriminate. So saying that people were mass raped or that babies were mass beheaded isn't just, it's not just a quibble over a particular detail. This is the lie that was used to justify the death of more children in a month than a whole year of Ukraine, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. This was the lie that allowed Palestinians and really Arabs more broadly and Muslims, etc., to be framed as barbaric, uncivilized, undeserving of mercy, undeserving of diplomatic solutions, undeserving of peace, undeserving of a ceasefire. The reason there's no ceasefire right now is precisely because of these kinds of just devastating, disgusting, disturbing lies. So if you're going to stand up and say that October 7th was a tragedy, fine, we agree. But you can't say that there was this mass campaign of Hamas rapes, because that's what's used to justify the continuation of the very genocide that you suggest you are trying to stop. Kamala Harris said other things that maybe didn't deserve fact checking. They weren't lies, but they were certainly contradictions that needed to be understood. For example, how do you say you want a ceasefire, but we're going to keep arming and funding Israel, right? Like, I would say, well, how do you square that circle, right? Like, if Netanyahu won't listen to you and he keeps prosecuting a war, and we know that he's prosecuting a war with our weapons and our political cover, then the question might be, well, are you willing to not give him political cover? Are you willing to not give him weapons? Are you willing to not, or are you willing to not sell weapons, right? These are all the things that we have to ask. Though that kind of follow-up would have been incredibly important. Donald Trump was asked about the racial identity of Kamala Harris. He was asked, to sort of explain, justify, defend his comments at NABJ, where he questioned her blackness. And this is against the backdrop of an entire movement or campaign to question her blackness. I thought that Donald Trump's response for about 12 seconds was good. He said, her race doesn't matter to me. I don't care what she is. That's all he had to say. But he kept going. He's like, he started to make jokes and jabs or not jokes, but he was doing it what he does and attacking her subtly. It was deplorable. But I expected the journalist to follow with Kamala Harris and say, not just like kind of, what do you make of Donald Trump or what have you, but to force her to say, sort of, how do you identify racially? What is your racial identification? I'm not saying that I'm not questioning Kamala Harris's blackness at all. She is black. She's a black woman to me. She's a black person. She's also a person of Indian descent. But that doesn't nullify or negate her blackness. I've known Kamala Harris for 2 decades. She's a black woman. She's always been a black woman. Before I knew her, she was a black woman. But it is interesting that they asked Donald Trump that question, which could be considered a settled matter, and yet they don't sort of at least force Kamala Harris to reckon with the question, even if she ultimately says, I'm not going to dignify that with the response. I think at the very least, you got to be in the same conversation, particularly since the voting public, the American public, the viewing public wants to know, or at least is under the impression that there might be some doubt or ambiguity around her racial identity, even though I don't believe there is. Kamala Harris was asked last night to explain her shifting positions on a range of issues, which I thought was a great question. And they asked her two things. They asked her sort of why her positions had changed, and if her kind of moral center, I'm not using the exact word, but they basically said, has your moral compass changed, or has your values changed? And because they asked those two questions, she took the easy one. As I would have too, she did the right thing. She said, no, moral compass hasn't changed. Here's why I am on this. Here's why I'm on that. But they didn't force her to wrestle with the contradiction of it, which I thought was interesting. So all of that to say, Kamala Harris was fact-checked plenty. She didn't tell a lot of lies, although that the Israeli rape hoax was a super lie that should have been addressed and confronted. But I do think she could have gotten more follow-ups, tougher pushback, etc. Now, I don't think there's some underground conspiracy to elect Kamala Harris or anything like that. I think that she wasn't asked about Israel because mainstream media tends to be uniform in its support of Israel, which is why there was very little debate between Trump and Harris on the question. It was really just like, who loves Israel more? Who could out-imperialist the other? But I do think that there's a way that Donald Trump takes up so much oxygen. He kept over talking, finishing sentences, interrupting, blah, 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 that he makes a very bright, shiny, blinking target. He's an easier person to want to fact check. But even when that's true, and that's the reason, rather than some kind of malicious intent or some kind of sneakiness, I still maintain that that Kamala Harris should have been fact-checked more, challenged more, confronted more in that debate. And that's just that. Anyway, y'all, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. I got a couple more quick stories for you, and then we'll be on our way. But I want to make sure that we get to some urgent stuff going on in the culture. We'll talk about it. Stay right here. Peace, family. Welcome back to Night School. A Michigan judge has finally gotten some kind of accountability. Okay, so this woman, her name is Kathleen Ryan. She is a probate judge. She got secretly recorded by one of her staffers making vile and racist and homophobic comments. This is rare because usually when you reveal a tape of somebody talking and they don't know they're being recorded, it sounds racist, or it feels racist, or it is obviously racist. But this is all those things. But on top of that, this is one of those rare moments where the person being recorded actually calls themselves racist. That's right. This woman who makes life-altering decisions for people who come before her in a court, a woman who's been on the bench for 13 years, 13 years, has admitted that she herself is a, quote, new racist. That's right. She called herself a racist. I have yet to see something like that before. So this is new. I want y'all to listen to this and hear exactly what this woman said. This is courtesy of ABC 7. Check this out.
Now accused of making racist comments and using shocking, derogatory language. Thank you for joining us for 7 News Detroit at 6. I'm Mike Duffy. 7 investigator Heather Catallo joins us now with more about why in Oakland County.
Here we go.
7 investigators have obtained the record. And now she's back in the headlines. Well, if you're black from any other country, you're doing way better. If you're an American black person, then you're a lazy piece of.
The 7 investigators have obtained the recordings that county officials say prompted Judge Ryan's removal.
Oh, he's just I have no use for him.
She's made it a little.
Wow. So if you caught that, good. If not, I'll read it to you because I don't want to play that twice. Judge Kathleen Ryan, again, removed from a bench in Detroit, was recorded saying 2 different things. Right? One thing was referring to a prominent official as the F word and the C word, both homophobic. You can do your Mad Libs, your Scrabble, your Hangman, whatever to figure out the words, but she called him a homophobic slur that began with an F, and as you saw, a one that begins with a C. She also said that she is a, quote, systemic racist. I don't know if we're supposed to be impressed by the use of language or the theoretical sophistication of it all, but I don't feel any better that she calls herself a systemic racist. I'll read the exact quote to you that this woman said. She said, I can honestly say that, okay, I am not systemically racist. I am a new racist. I'm sorry, I may have said that backwards before. Yeah, she said she's not a systemic racist. She is a new racist. She said, I never was. She said, but now I am because you're shoving this shit down my throat, making allegations that you don't know shit about. You're telling me who I am, and you've never even fucking met me. Fuck you, she exclaims in one. Then she says later, from England, if you're a black from any other country, you're doing way better. If you're an American black person, then you're a fucking lazy piece of shit. Now, this judge believes, based on her comments, that she is not systemically racist, that she doesn't, I'm not sure what she means by that, particularly when all of her racist comments about, immigration and who comes here and who's from here and, what your citizenship status is and the relationship between that and your laziness, et cetera, et cetera. To me, that's all born out of a systemic analysis. So that's a little weird to me. But that said, she says that she's not systemically racist. What she probably would argue is that her racism doesn't impact how she treats people when they come into her court, but also that she hasn't always been that way, that she wasn't produced out of this country. It's because of all these black people doing terrible things that make her racism warranted. And then the homophobia it's indefensible. And she doesn't even attempt to defend that one. She just kind of says awful things about somebody. How did the tapes come up, you might ask? That's a good question. Well, in this particular state, you only need one person to consent to recording a call. If one person's recording the call, you better be careful. And she got recorded by Oakland County Probate Court Administrator Edward Hutton. In case you didn't know, Mr. Hutton hates the judge, hates her guts. He said, she's made it a living hell in the past 6 years. I mean, it's been terrible. It's cost me relationships. I think it's affected my health. I can't sleep. So basically, she's been harassing him for a long time. She clearly says awful, racist, homophobic stuff to him all the time. He can't take it. So he was recording it to defend himself and probably also just to make her life terrible. Well, now it's her life that's going to be terrible. She's been removed from the bench, and Chief Justice David Coulter, who is the Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court and also an Oakland County executive, said this. He said, there's absolutely no place for harassment of any kind or for racist or homophobic language by anyone at Oakland County, especially by someone the public must be confident will act fairly and impartially. The alleged conduct and abhorrent comments made by Judge Ryan merited her removal from the probate court docket pending further investigation. Blah, blah, blah. So this is a no-brainer. This is an easy one. You let her go. you fire her because you're racist, you're homophobic, you do it in public, you do it in private, no one can trust you. But the thing I want y'all to think about, two things I want y'all to think about. This judge has friends. This judge has conversations. This judge isn't a pariah to everybody. What's my point? My point is she ain't the only one. You think she's not having those conversations with other judges who aren't dumb enough to get recorded or who don't harass their staff? And regardless of whether they say they're systemically or systematically or individually or culturally, whatever kind of races they are, they racist. And if you think that doesn't impact whether you give somebody 2 years versus 5 years, whether you give somebody parole versus or probation versus incarceration, if it doesn't impact whether you hold someone in contempt of court, whether you see someone's having redemptive value, all these things matter. And no one can be completely neutral. No one can be completely colorblind. But when you have judges who are explicitly and unabashedly racist, self-identified as racist in the court system, it makes the entire system even more untrustworthy than it already is by design and by structure. So any judge, any defendant, any person who's been in her court, if you were found guilty or given a sentence, you need to go appeal right now. You need to have your sentence vacated, especially if you're Black or brown. You need to be out. Actually, if you're white too, because what if she gave you more time? Like, you know what, you white, you expect more from me. You know, whatever the situation is, once somebody's racist, all bets are off. Once somebody's homophobic, all bets are off. So hopefully a whole bunch of people get released from prison because of this, because they probably didn't get a fair shake. And also, y'all, be careful who you mistreat. This woman could have gone a whole career being racist like a whole lot of other judges. But she got pulled down because she mistreated somebody who decided to resist, to fight back, and the whistle blow. So first of all, shout out to the whistleblowers who hold the powerful accountable, but also just be mindful of how you treat people, because the people you step over on the way up would be the people who you will meet on the way down. And they might be the reason why you fell back down to the ground. All right, y'all. I want to cover something else. It's been such an interesting, I'm looking at these, oh yeah, we'll get to the comments in a bit, but it's been such an interesting year. It's been such an interesting year. So much attention has been placed on the WNBA. So much attention has been placed on the WNBA. So many people have talked about, argued about Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, etc. Well, now the conversation is turning because the WNBA gets more attention. There's going to be more critical conversation about it. Well, in the last couple of days, that conversation has reached maybe not a fever pitch, but it's getting there. WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert is trying to clean up some comments she made on Tuesday during an appearance on CNBC's Power launch. Engelbert was asked about the attacks players have faced on social media this season. And that's a great question. We've seen the Angel Reeses, we've seen the Caitlin Clarks, we've seen, we've been going down Chelsea Stewart, we're going down like Brianna Stewart. We've seen so many. The problem isn't the question. The problem is the answer. When asked about the attacks on players, the commissioner of the WNBA didn't condemn them. Instead, she pointed to money. She basically said that the rivalries were good for business. I'm not even exaggerating. You know what? Check this out for yourselves. You can see what I'm talking about. Understand these people. Sorry, a little tech issue there. As once again, y'all can tell when I'm solo on a production tip. It's not smooth like last night. Here you go.
That question, which raises some sensitivities of rivalries between players. In the case of Angel Reese, who's just had to shut it down because of a wrist injury, Caitlin Clark, who's continuing to play. Rivalry that goes back to their college days, presumably, where I guess some trash talking entered in. But now it seems on some social media channels to have taken a darker turn, a more menacing turn, where race has been introduced into the conversation, where sexuality is sometimes introduced into the conversation. How do you try and stay ahead of that, try and tamp it down, or act as a league when two of your most visible players are involved, not personally, it would seem, but their fan bases are involved in saying some very uncharitable things about the other?
Well, the one thing that's great about the league right now, we do sit at this intersection of culture and sport and fashion and music. Like, the WNBA players are really looked at now as kind of cultural icons.
True.
And when you have that, you have a lot of attention on you. There's no more apathy. Everybody cares. It is a little that Bird Magic moment, if you recall, from 1979, when those two rookies came in from a big college rivalry, one white, one black. And so we have that moment with these two. But the one thing I know about sports, you need rivalry. That's what makes people watch. They want to watch games of consequence between rivals. They don't want everybody being nice to one another. So the social media is different today than it was in 1979 when it didn't exist. But, you know, I always tell the players, you know, I was told a long time ago, if someone's typing something in and you wouldn't ask their advice, ignore it. So it's a balance, but certainly from a marketing dollars, but corporate partners are stepping up to endorse these players. Much more so than they were 5 years ago.
Wow. Whenever I criticize Adam Silver, the NBA's commissioner now, I'm going to go back and watch this video and tell myself that I'm being too hard on him. Because I've never seen anybody, not even in the NFL, have I seen a response so awful. The announcer said, look, there's rivalries, but they've taken a different turn, taken a dark turn, and not the best use of phrase, but he basically said it's getting offensive, it's getting identity politics driven, it's getting racist, it's getting sexist, it's getting homophobic. Awful things are happening online to your players. And what do you make of it? And she basically said, look, as long as it pays the bills and brings in revenue, we are happy with it. That, to me, in all seriousness, there could not be a worse answer than that. But I want to show you something else that came up. And this is why I love the WNBA, because the players, including the white players, and sometimes especially the white players, find an opportunity, they make an opportunity to step up and speak the truth and do the right thing. That includes two-time WNBA champion and finals MVP Breanna Stewart, the first overall pick in the 2016 WNBA draft. She basically said this was some bullshit. And unlike NBA players who are often reluctant to criticize the commissioner, Breanna Stewart stood on business, as the kids say, and I thought did a solid, more than solid job breaking down or responding to the commissioner's ridiculousness. Check this out.
Like, to be honest, I saw the interview today, and then have been in talks with Terry at the WBPA. I think that it's kind of disappointing to hear, because the way that the fans have surged, and especially behind Kaylin and Angel coming to this league, but also bringing like a race aspect to a different level, and there's no place for that in our sport. And I think that's really it, is we want our sport to be inclusive for race, gender, and really a place where people can be themselves. So we wish, obviously, Cathy would use her platform in a different way and have made that a little bit better, but kind of just telling the fans, like, enough is enough, become a fan of our sport. And for the new ones, like, lock in on everybody, but don't be disrespectful.
Don't be disrespectful. She said there's no place for it, inclusivity. She said all the right things. It wasn't just some liberal PCBS. She it seemed sincere, it seemed principled, and she spoke truth to power. She not only spoke against the racism and the sexism and the homophobia and all that stuff, she spoke against her boss, the real boss, the commissioner, right? Although the commissioner kind of works for the owners, you know what I'm saying. She took a dangerous position. Shout out to Breanna Stewart. Shout out to all of the WNBA players who stood up and spoke out. They spoke up so strongly that the commissioner had to kind of come back with her tail between her legs and say the following. During a recent media interview, I was asked about the dark side, again, not good words, of social media and online conversation about WNBA rivalries and race. To be clear, there is absolutely no place for hate or racism of any kind in the WNBA or anywhere else. What she didn't say was that she messed up. What she didn't say was, hey, I dismissed something that should not have been dismissed. What she did not say was, I made a mistake, I apologize. She made it seem almost as if people didn't understand her, and now she's going to clarify that racism and hate don't have a place in WNBA. I'm sure you didn't think racism and hate had a place in the WNBA anyway. I don't think you're a racist or a hateful person, Ms. Engelbert. I don't think that you were trying to suggest that. I think you just did a terrible job answering a question, and you got to take ownership of the terrible job, because otherwise it makes us wonder how you will deal with such matters when something's at stake, if you're not willing to take accountability on something that's fairly low stakes. Nobody's calling for your head. No one's calling for your job. You just say, hey, I focused on the corporate stuff because I was on CNBC, but I really should have said this, and this. That's all you got to do. But you didn't. And therefore, you are where you are. But again, I've never seen a league of any pro sport that has a wider proportion of conscious players, of engaged players, of socially justice-minded players, but not people who are just, carrying a flag for a moment or for likes or clicks. They seem to be genuinely principled and committed to this. We saw that during Black Lives Matter. We've seen it in other moments. So shout out to the WNBA as always for leading the way, for being stewards of this social justice life. All right, before we go, we got one last story, one last conversation that I want to have. And this one has me on fire. And I really mean this, yo. I am very unhappy about this story, and y'all will understand why in just a moment. There's a woman, a mother, 48 years old in Colorado. She is currently being held in contempt of court for the most incensing reason imaginable. Okay, a judge in Colorado is holding a 48-year-old mother of six, in contempt after she opposed allowing her two sons, one of them is 10 years old, one of them is 13 years old, of attending therapy with their father. Now, you might say, well, why would she not let her sons have therapy sessions with the father? If people don't get along, if people get divorced, if people are, facing a split or there's some kind of tension, don't let the parent beef get in the way of the kids. I hear you, except this isn't a normal situation. She's stopping the kids from going to therapy with the father because the father is a former cop who has been charged with sexually and physically abusing some of their children. That's right. I'm going to say it again. Dad's accused of sexually abusing and physically and sexually abusing the kids. Mom is divorcing the guy. Dad wants to have therapy with the kids. Again, she's a mother of six. They got 6 kids. Some of them been abused. I don't know which one to have. But what we know is he's being charged with felony assault for sexually assaulting his own kids. And the mom is saying, I don't want them going near him for therapy. That does not seem like an unreasonable ask. I don't know any mom in the world who wouldn't do the same. I don't know any dad in the world who wouldn't do the same. But now that the mother, Rachel Pickrell Hawkins, is being forced to spend 7 weekends in jail, I'm going to say it again. She's being forced to spend 7 weekends in jail. The world is outraged because her ex-husband, Mike Hawkins, was released with an ankle monitor. So I'm going to say it one more time. He's accused of molesting the kids. They go through a divorce. The mom is saying, I'm not sending my kids with the person who, I'm not sending any of my kids with the person who sexually and physically abused them. Judge says, well, then you got to go to jail every weekend for 7 weekends. Meanwhile, the husband, who's facing trial for the abuse, is at home with an ankle monitor, posting $50,000 in blood. Now, if you don't know this guy, the cop. He was once hailed as a hero. It's just why I hate these hero stories. After the 2012 mass shooting at the movie theater in Aurora. But after allegations later surfaced of violence on the job, he retired. The Huffington Post obtained a heavily redacted arrest warrant because they cover up for cops. They cover up for all these things. There's all these reasons in which those close to him said he'd been abusive for years. He was charged with 7 felony counts of sex assault of a child and 1 misdemeanor count of child abuse. 7 felony counts of sexual assault on a child. The police say he repeatedly assaulted a family member living in his house from 2002 to 2021 and physically abused one of his kids in 2018. So it seems like the physical abuse is one thing, but the sexual abuse, it was over 2 decades. Sexual assault. And again, for a cop to get charged by the cops, you know it's bad. He probably could have gotten away with a whole lot of stuff, but even cops don't want to see this happen. So look, he deserves a day in court. He deserves due process. He deserves a fair trial. But it's looking funny in the light. He looks mighty guilty to me. And a judge is still holding the mom in contempt of court for not wanting him to go to therapy. This is why this system doesn't work. It protects the wrong people. Anyway, the case is still in the initial stages and Hawkins hasn't even entered a plea yet. A hearing is scheduled for next month. There is a GoFundMe page started for the mom. If you want to find that page, you're welcome to check it out. But in the meantime, I just want to say any judge that would hold the mom in contempt of court for this is an idiot and a monster. You're allowing either your own ideologies, your own baggage, your own adherence to a system that clearly doesn't work well for in the interest of justice, to blind you of what's very obvious. What decent person would do anything different than this mom? And if every single person who's decent or reasonable, to use the legal standard, would do the same thing, why the hell are we punishing her? Why is she spending weekends in jail while he's home? Again, I'm an abolitionist. I'm not arguing that he should be locked up. He should probably be in a mental health facility, secure confinement probably, so that he can get healed from whatever this thing is that makes him be a monster to people. He certainly shouldn't be around children. He certainly should be accountable. I'm all for accountability processes and practices. And in this case, this might be one of the few narrow cases where you do need restraint of the few. Again, so I'm not saying lock everybody up. I'm saying if you are locking somebody up, how do you decide that she's the one to lock up and he's the one to let home, and he's the one who's a threat to the world and definitely a threat to people's kids, even his own? Anyway, support this mom if you can. Write to the judge that gave her contempt of court, complain about that, see if we can get this one removed from the bench, because this one seems wild to me, unless it's an explanation that I don't know or I don't understand. And I can't imagine there is. Anyway, y'all, that is the show for tonight. I want to thank you for watching Night School. I had a whole lot more to go, but we'll cover it later because I love y'all too much to put y'all to sleep. I want y'all to get a good night's sleep, and I got work to do. So we're going to continue to build and talk, but thank you for watching the show. Thank you for sharing time with me. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the join button. When you hit the like button, you let the YouTube algorithms know that corporate media is not the only game in town. Hit the like button so that we can make our mark in those YouTube algorithms. Also hit the subscribe button, because when you do that, you expand our social media footprint, which allows us to get the content out to more people. And of course, when you hit the join button, you become part of our paid monthly family, or our monthly paid family. You become a monthly member of the channel, which gives us the financial stability that we need to do the work that we do every single day, making corporate media work harder, making them work so hard, hopefully, that we dismantle them. The work we do, breaking corporate or media stories down and giving you true answers. The work we do of giving radical perspectives within a neoliberal media universe. We want to tell the truth, and we want to do it with integrity and decency and high quality. And we can only do that with your financial support. So please consider becoming a member of the channel. Also, if you don't want to make a monthly commitment, I ask that you consider making a one-time commitment right here through Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle. You can consider it like the monthly tuition for Night School, as I like to call it. If you do that, you allow us to do Night School Monday to Friday, 9 p.m. You allow us to do office hours at 9 p.m. on Sundays, the Mumia Abu-Jamal and Marc Lamont Hill podcast, known as The Classroom in the Cell, on Sunday mornings at 9, and the Coffee and Books podcast on Saturdays at 9 a.m. We can only do that work with your support. We can only do that work with your contribution. There's no billionaire backing us. There's no corporate media cutting a check. This is all from the power of the people. So if you like what you see and you want to see more, if you want us to have more content, more staff, more elements, more bigger studio, better quality, all these things we're building and we're working toward, but we have to do that with your support. So if everybody watching could donate, we would be incredibly grateful. If you give $1 right now, we'd be grateful. If you give $1 million, we'd be really grateful. But anything in between, we'd also be grateful for. But we ask right now that if everybody watching could donate $10, if everybody watching right now could go to Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle and send $10 for the month as a kind of monthly tuition for all the content. If you were to drop $10 in right now, we could meet all of our financial goals for the month. We could pay all the staff. We could complete all the projects, and we could invest toward the future. If everyone watching right now were to do at least $10, again, no amount is too small, no amount is too big, but $10 from everyone watching right now would get us to our financial goals for the month. So I ask you to consider it. But even if you can't, that's okay. Like the content, subscribe to the content, share the content, but most of all, make sure you study the content, because that studying, deep studying, is what night school is all about. See you tomorrow.